You weren't here to complain.
We had a little bit of I guess, a sort of social collision with certain factions of the society at the time. We were not welcome in a lot of places, and the sort of hippies use the side door thing was really quite evident here and there. Obviously not here, this was just a mistake on the part of our agent. But yeah, it was tough, and we were in a hurry.
Would it have been partly the perception of what you thought a city like Nashville, the music that was coming out at the time? Obviously, you have the Byrds, they've got the drugstore truck driving van, which is essentially a song about the stereotype. And at the same time, you know, when we did our radio thing last fall, one of the songs you wanted to play was Charlie Rich, produced by Billy Sherrill here in 1970. So, like, what was your perception as a young man, totally into Electric Chicago, the Delta Blues, Atlantic R&B? What was your perception of the music coming out of the city at the time?
Well, in the UK, we were really, radio was really confined, and there was not a lot of, there was nothing broad-based about being able to get into a groove. Even in the late 60s, the national radio, the BBC, was constipated, and it really was. The selections that they gave you, they developed this thing called Radio 1, which was just out and out sheer pop. And there were a couple of darker programs. John Peel came along and started the punk thing. The whole reaction to glossy pop was there, but we didn't really get much outside of Jim Reeves and that whole blanket on the ground kind of thing. And we were worried because we'd already started playing in Alabama and places like that, where we were told not to leave the hotel room, and we hadn't done anything. Just it, you know. We were not welcome here and there, and it was that era that so many of my peer group experienced that. So I guess, inane as it was, I think we thought that Nashville was probably going to be a bit intimidating. I didn't know about the smash recordings of Charlie Rich then. It's great to be so old. Yeah. Because now, I mean, I've spent the last 45 years or whatever it is digging so deep into the stuff that is everywhere, you know, from Tukwila, Mississippi through to you know, East Nashville. So much stuff, but of course at the time it wasn't available. It was so, and we didn't have the kind of flexibility with radio and the options here. You could just move the FM dial.
Given that restriction and not that sort of lack of sort of breadth and depth on the BBC or in the media, how were you discovering the Chicago blues, the Delta blues, and a lot of that Atlantic R&B? Because when your band signed to Atlantic, that was like, for you, was probably like coming home to the home you haven't had yet.
Well, we didn't deserve it, because it's just, Atlantic was the absolute tabernacle of taste and proper stuff, you know. But how did we get to it? We
because you're doing that exploration now, and you're even like on the credits for Saving Grace, you have the breakdown of, you know, songs dating back to Robert Byrne, you know, Scott's poems, and
well, Sufi Diane took it upon herself. Detail is everything, and you know, what's happened over the years. I'll come back to the Delta thing, but what happens over the years is that a beautiful song, like say "I Never Would Marry," it goes all the way through time, and every 30 years somebody else claims they've written it. Which is a very familiar situation. So for me as a kid, there were two German promoters, Lippmann and Rau. Now Fritz Rau, in the end ultimately they became Zeppelin's promoters in Germany. And they had been operating before the Second World War well, Fritz used to represent Marlene Dietrich. And they took it upon themselves, because they'd been in Chicago and been around, to create this phenomenon called the American Delta Blues, the American Folk Blues.
Festival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went to 64, 65, 66, 67, and I saw all these wraiths that came staggering onto Birmingham Town Hall stage. Absolutely could not believe it, because like Skip James had been driving a school bus down in Bentonia, Mississippi, and you know, it was just some house had come from somewhere, and the otherworldly element of that, the sound of the voice, the blue note, that whole deal, it got everybody. And meanwhile, the Stones and the Yardbirds and Cyril Davis, Alexis Cornwell, they were all busy in the folk scene in London. You know, the traditional jazz of 1950 in England with Chris Barber had suddenly become skiffle as well. So Sonny Terry and Brown and McGee came up. All these people, Sonny Boy Williamson on English television on a news program was absolutely absurd. It's like, what sort of trip is that?
Because I remember Eric Clapton telling me that as a boy, he saw Big Bill Broonzy on television. He was like 15, and it was like, that was like his road to Damascus. As soon as he saw that, he knew exactly what he wanted to do.
Yeah, black, brown, and white.
Yeah.
Poof. So everybody wanted to put that sort of blue note and that kind of very otherworldly attitude that these guys have got, because some had great stage presence. Some of the blues shouters, you know, the guys from St. Louis, Kansas City, they got the kind of nightclub thing. But the other guys, Bucko White, Sleepy John Leslie, these people were crying, but they weren't crying. They were just, it was something that I found later in West Africa.
Yeah.
It was that way of making the notes.
It's really like making the heart speak.
Yeah.
You know, it's an emoting that is almost beyond literal description.
Yeah. So when you
Because
hear,
it's so private.
yeah. So you think about some of the stuff that is available now in record stores, the Arrow Lomax collections and all that sort of blues fell this morning. Listen, I just heard that voice, and I think it was John Estes. In fact, we played in Memphis last night, and we came up the highway, and we were passing Brownsville, Tennessee, where John Estes lived. And I remember about 40 years ago driving there to try and find out, because in his song, if you go to Brownsville, take the right-hand road. I went, okay, Brownsville. Which right-hand road? And I just keep looking for these clues. You know, it's just, it's the spirit.
And it's interesting because your experience with that is what then sends someone like myself back to that music as well, because I'm from Philly, so we have a lot of R&B. There was a lot of native soul that I would hear on the top 40 radio, but I didn't really find my way to Howlin' Wolf or Robert Johnson until I started hearing the Yardbirds, the Stones, and Zeppelin. So in a way, my education in what you had experienced firsthand really turned me around in a way that sent me on these paths, not unlike the paths that you follow now.
That's right.
With these great old folk songs, and also then taking contemporary composition and finding the deep roads in there, like when you do Everybody's Song by Lowe, the Minneapolis Trio. There's a lot of North Africa in your interpretation.
Well, that's the
And not even interpretation, it's like you're writing more of the song.
That's right. And it's the guys who bring that out. But they just make a noise, and it's pretty cool. And the great thing is, it's, for me, I feel so at home with the instrumentation that's with us now, because it leans a lot towards my love of North Africa and the adventures that I had down there, and the scrapes that I got into, and learning how to speak Maghrebi Arabic to some degree so that I can get myself out of trouble.
A working knowledge.
Feen is a good word in Moroccan Arabic. It means wear. So you can anything, you know. It's just all that stuff that goes to make this music and my adventures down there. And Jimmy Page came with me in about 73, I think, or 73. And we must have spent about 3 months down there, right on the gateway to the Sahara. And on the road to Gulmin, I started writing the lyrics to Kashmir, and I've still got the book. It's called Driving Through Kashmir, but I never got there. It was a long.
You got there in a very poetical way.
Yeah, it was a long way from North Africa. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's the sound and again the blue note and the scales are so evocative. And when I was a kid playing in the folk clubs, Davy Graham and Bert Jansch, John Renborn, the incredible string band, they were lullabies to me. You know, I couldn't really take the straight pop.
Because even somebody like Davy Graham, who actually did travel to North Africa, and then brought a lot of those blue notes and that technique to Bert Jansch and the Incredibles. It's the way the roots and the roads and the spiritual exploration informs the way these songs were written and performed. And then you have somebody like Paul Simon, who's in London. He sees Davy Graham, and he brings that flavor back to America. Also Martin Carthy, and he's bringing that back to Sounds of Silence and his whole catalog.
That's right, exactly right. Well, it's such an evocative, the spirit of it. It's coming from a totally and absolutely, in its early, in the stages that I felt it, on cassettes in marketplaces in the Atlas Mountains. There was no commercial ambition. It was just creating this stuff, you know, and we got so bogged down once I left school and I was sort of living in the back of the van in the Van de Joy. My parents had chucked me out and said, if you're not going to be an accountant, you can't stay here. And I said, well, surely there must be a manger somewhere. And I just think this gift is something that keeps me feeling fresh, and these people, my companions now, are the vibrance is and the humor within it. There's tension. I mean, this is a big deal. I'm not quite older than God's dog, but if this is what I'm doing, it's got to be spot on. It's got to be right. It's got to be humorous. It's got to have a nervousness to it. It's got to be exploratory, and that keeps me away from the Frank Irwin Center. Or whatever. I played one or two big gigs over the years, but the intimacy of what we do reminds me of what I used to see in the market in the top of, Eight Uriad or somewhere in Morocco. Where it's obviously we make records. We want people to like this, hear it. It's a different thing, though.
Well, it's interesting because I think in many ways the music that you're making with this band, and actually have been making all along for the last 12 records. This is your 12th quote-unquote solo record. But what's interesting is in most of those records were not solo in a literal sense because they were very collaborative.
Absolutely.
You know, you had Robbie Blunt on those early records who you played with way back in the day. Obviously, the new band Joy with Buddy Miller, obviously T-Bone and Alice and those collaborations, the Space Shifters, and this band, you've always worked, you thrive in collaboration.
Yeah.
Is there something in the way you want to express yourself or seek out something that's going to make you want to get up and sing? Does it really come from relationship?
I think it does, yeah. It comes from taking your gift individually, the various contributors, to a point beyond which, it wouldn't have been part of the normal outlet of artists, just pushing it that little bit further. So the Space Shifters was such a sort of amalgam of these different styles. It was so far out. It was the West African guy whose tongue went black and said he had a curse put on him, and all this shit was going on around us. And can you play that feeling? And then somebody came and said, "You've got to have a lie down now, Robert."
But from the very beginning, Zeppelin was an improvisation band.
Yeah, it was.
You know, you had songs, but in all of those, particularly, things like How Many More Times, on those early tours, when we talk about that first tour, you came over with basically one album of material and just took it out and did it in a way that I think was almost a jazz mentality, but with different tools.
I think you're right. I think the early sort of that How Many More Times period, that whole deal was based on that swing time extension of gift. And I quite often, and later on in the writing, when it got more detailed, by the time we got to Presence and albums like that, which didn't really catch the ear of the public, but to me, the Presence was the absolute epoch, the peak of being in that band. But I sometimes didn't really know where to put myself, because some of the stuff that was going on was so extreme. Like the song Remains the Same was so difficult because they didn't care about me. It was like an instrumental, so what am I going to do with that?
It's got such the rhythm in the riff is so weird.
Brilliant.
But at the same time, it's sort of a hard place for a singer to find.
Yeah. I tried to sing over and across the beats just because I wanted to be awkward as well. So things like For Your Life and now as I Rode Out, it's a different counter to just sing along that nice little song that I would have done in Nashville if I'd have been another guy.
What was the first folk music you heard as a boy?
I've heard Ian Campbell and Alex Campbell, the Campbell brothers, who gave birth to ultimately Next Generation, to UB40.
Yeah.
A far cry.
But James Swarbrick was in his band too.
Yeah.
And they went on to play with her.
That's right. Yeah. And the folk clubs then, it was quite a remarkable place where I lived, and in a way it still is, because it had a college that studied and developed experimental work with glass and stuff like that. It was a part of the old Roman theatre of glass making and stuff. So you get people from all over Europe bringing ideas to this little black country town. The sort of, couldn't be Haight-Ashbury, it's probably whatever it was just an unusual place to find myself as a kid. So the folk clubs were the place to be, and that music with the Delta blues and poetry and jazz. One of my dear friends passed away this week, and he was like a kingpin. He was thin, pretty Jack. And if I'd have been in another town 5 miles away, it would have been terrible. Because it could never have been like that. I was blessed.
Well, for a song like Chevrolet, which is the first song on Saving Grace, did you originally hear it in the Donovan version, which was Hey Jip, the slowness from 65?
I did, and it wasn't until I got the Alan Lomax recordings up in Como, Mississippi, with the two brothers. And at that time, with Osa Turner and all that stuff, I realized, wow. So when I was here, and when I was traveling around with the band of Joy, Paddy Griffin was recording with the guys from the North Mississippi All-Stars in the studio right on the Mississippi-Tennessee border. And I used to drive into Como and into the hill country and occasionally go to picnics on a Sunday. I was the only Englishman for 500 miles. But it was incredible, that whole drift of that music. A mixture of military rhythm and pipe and these crazy lyrics and melodies. It's
almost actually even more primal than what people think of as Delta blues, because
Yeah.
you almost take out the melodic and harmonic quotient. It becomes about that flute, piccolo, top
Yeah.
line,
Yeah.
and then that military drumming, and then it's about the vocal and just sort of that group energy.
It's trance.
Yeah.
A lot of time it's trance, and nobody's going anywhere for hours. It could be the same song for weeks. I was in a band that did that. I kept a book of Welsh grammar so I could nip to the side of the stage if it was going on a bit of a long time. Learn the verb to be in Welsh. Yeah, but it's great. It was fantastic. Look at what a game this is.
Well, one of the other things that's very interesting about your lifelong exploration of Celtic music, the folk revival, Delta, Chicago blues, 50s, 60s R&B, North Africa, all of that, a lot of it was originally filtered through San Francisco, which was a city you did not visit until January of '69, when Zeppelin was first played at Fillmore. What did San Francisco represent to you as a young, dreaming man in the English Midlands?
Well, voice, expression, and attitude and opinion. I mean, should we ever say that we have questionable politics? Well, what was going on at that time, when in about 66, 67, when the sort of bubblegum pop was moving into another, the culture was coming of age, so there were voices and there were opinions and there were incredible spokespeople, whatever you call it now. And there was a message there that we didn't have in England. You know, we had the beautiful old folk songs which make their way into the catalogues of a lot of American artists, but we didn't have the attitude and the records, and we didn't have radio that backed it up. We didn't have, records were banned in England just for some, if it might have intimidated some grandma in Manchester, they'd be straight off the playlist. Come on, what's that about?
Well, we do have to have a little bit of a blame here, because in America, Link Ray's Rummel was banned because people thought it was going to start teenage riots. It's an instrumental. There are no lyrics.
Yeah. Well, when Rock Around the Clock, the movie came out in England, so everybody
Shares one fly.
Yeah, they just ripped everything to pieces. Now, the whole cinema movie house was just left in matchsticks by guys in long purple jackets with velvet collars and crepe-soled shoes and beautiful elephant trunks who'd had enough. They just wanted to kick out the jams, you know. You didn't have to wait for the MC5, they were doing it already. And so no wonder, you know, Blink Ray was...
But it's interesting that you have been performing the Cuckoo, which is a classic Appalachian song with Saving Grace, and that was a song that I first heard through a band we talked about before, which is Kaleidoscope. You know, fantastic band from Los Angeles that incorporated Middle Eastern, electric guitars. David Lindley, Jackson Brown's longtime guitarist, he was an original founding member, and that their explorations in that clearly had an impact on you, because you talked about Kaleidoscope as well as Love, Arthur Lee, and Movie Grip, in the way all of those things were synthesized here in a way that inspired you.
That's right. When I was a teenager and I heard Beacon from Mars, which apparently later on I found out should have been called Bacon from Mars.
It was a typo. It's true, it was a typo. The artist got it.
You see, we could actually do a tour talking about this song.
Take this back on.
Welcome, So, it was just Taksim was the track on that, which is a Turkish introduction to the dervish dance and stuff like that. this is an aside. When I was first considered to be a worldie in about 1999 or something, I went to the Royal Festival of August in London to see these guys, whirling dervishes that move with such grace.
The big white skirts.
Against the taxing music, which is spectacular. And I was there with, in the row behind me, there were some very big shooters in the sort of world music from the Telegraph and the Guardian newspapers. And I was going, this is just, why didn't I be like that? And then about 2 hours later, the woman next to me woke me up and said, "It's all over now. You can go home." And I've been dribbling down her shoulder. Yeah, well, all these
You went into the trance. It does work.
They got me, yeah, it was a long day.
What was it like working with someone like Ahmet Ertegun? Because Ahmet Ertegun is someone that you had a very great personal as well as commercial relationship with. And for you, he was no degrees of separation. Because he like co-wrote I Got a Woman by Ray Charles. He recorded all of those records for him, and he discovered Professor Longhair. They found him in the bar in Algiers across the
That's right, yeah.
And when you would sit with him, did you just want to like, let's not talk about all this other stuff. Can you tell me how you found so-and-so and what was it like working with Jesse Stone, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera?
well, it was like being with you. It was sort of, it was
That's
amazing.
unbelievable.
Except you're not showing your Turkish side, which he did.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, he said to me, man, after John passed away, he said, I really dig what you're doing, man. He said, but why don't you put the band back together? I said, that's your first mistake, Arnold. First mistake ever since I made it. And I did a thing in the mid-80s called The Honey Drippers Volume 1. And I've got so many other tracks that I haven't used yet. But he said, he'd just gone on and on and on about it. And I went out one night with him and Phil Spector. We went to some clubs. We went to see we went to a couple of jazz clubs and stuff. And after a couple of old fashions, we were singing the outro fade-out vocals for Gene Pitney songs, which didn't really go down too well with the jazz stars. And we just kept going on about all the Benny King, for example, when he left the Drifters and he started all his songs, all the albums that he made with Ecstasy and very first Taste of Love. They were so beautiful, but he always sang out at the end. It made my heart beat, you know, so of course we spent the nights together just doing Benny King and Gene Pitney outros, which is and nobody came and took us away. But it was great because he was a mine of information. So when I started, I said, look, he said, why don't you do something with all these old songs that you know? And he said, I'll produce it. And I said, okay, that should be fun. And he used his old term, the Getra. When he used Ertegun backwards was his sort of pseudonym. Yes. And he said, well, so piano. He said, I'll call Charles Brown in Chicago. I said, no, you won't. This is not bringing in all these great, amazing people, Bill Doggett, all that. This was, no, I've got to do it with Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page. And we did it that way. But yeah, the times that we had, the conversations that we had were priceless and mostly very funny.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he was okay with me, but he wasn't always okay with everybody.
Well,
But that's,
yeah.
you measure the cloth.
Well, for a time I was on the nominating committee for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he was on it. And obviously, he's one of the founders. And at some of those early meetings, I'm telling a little tale out of school here, but he would show up and, you know, people were trying to like get their favorite artists on the table on the ballot, and he would just start going off about Purple Clarence Lofton.
Oh, yeah.
Boogie piano players
Sure.
that no one had ever heard of, and said, that should be on the Hall of Fame. Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously so.
Well, he was a friend friend of Peter Wheatstraw, the devil's son-in-law. Yeah. We should do some more of this stuff. You know, it's just incredible what you can.
Well, when you do a song, like on a new record, you do a song by one of our mutual favorite bands, Moby Grape. It's called It's a Beautiful Day Today, written and sung by the bassist, Bob Mosley. And what's really interesting about that song is that Bob has an incredible voice. I once described him as like, you know, a Viking crossed with Otis Redding.
Yeah.
You know, it's like massive roar, but with so much deep, natural soul. When you address a song like that, what is it that you're trying to preserve and extend at the same time?
Well, I was trying to invoke, if you like, with my friends, another time when those points within that song were crucial. You know, when things weren't going quite so fast, when it was. And he was then, I mean, as you quite rightly say, I think we didn't sing that, I don't know whether it was Omaha. He went on to do Gypsy Wedding and all that.
Gypsy Wedding,
Murder in My Heart for the Judge, I think. But he was talking about a time when he wanted, out there on the West Coast, take some time, and look what's happened.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't know anything about contemporary age of communication then. And it's just so beautiful and so ironic to sing it in this era when we don't know truth from fantasy. You know, apparently I got married yesterday, and it didn't look like her, whoever she was. I don't know what's happened to me today. So it was from another time and very evocative, and especially as Mosley was such a growler, you know. And he's still around, and his wife is in touch.
Well, one of my favorite stories about him was Peter Lewis told me that Peter Lewis was one of the guitar players in Moby Grape. Peter had flown to LA to join a band that Mosley was already in. It's got a guy named Joel Scott Hill, singer guitar player who later worked with Can't Eat. Anyway, Bob Mosley picks Peter up at the airport, and they get in the car, you know, how do you do? And Mosley looks at Peter and says, I play bass like a motherfucker and I can sing up the high C. What can you do?
I'd be
I gotta make this stuff up. This is why I love my work.
I really want to wait, and I must say that Peter Lewis's voice, the resonance of it, and the depth of his voice. The last studio recording, I think, really was called, there was 20 Granite Creek, and he sings that horse out in the rain.
Really wonderful. When you and the band approached the songs on this album, how attentive were you, and even are, in performance to maybe the road's not taken, which is that you're staying true to the stories and origins, particularly in the traditional, sort of more public domain material, but they're kind of entrusted to you because these other folks have carried the tunes before. You know, you diligently point out like the 17th and 18th century origins of I Will Never Marry and As I Moved Out. But you're also, as you pointed out in one piece I read, you were talking about the joy of melancholia. And I thought that was an interesting phrase because many of the stories in the songs are sad and violent. And at the same time, you're performing them, arranging them, giving them another life that's meant to emphasize the hope that is either in the story or can come out of it.
No.
Very succinct answer, very long question.
Yeah, no, I couldn't see the question mark, but the bottom line is... No, the thing is that the melancholia, it's, if you think about what it was like in the times that some of these songs were written. I mean, I come from my family from the Black Country, which was one of the first areas in the world smitten by the Industrial Revolution, and people were put into more restrictive bondage, and the never saw the light of day, they're all the usual shit. So what happens is you get together when it's break time, when it's the seventh day, if you're lucky, or whatever it is, and you sing about the area. But if you go to other countries, and you go more into the rural thing, you hear about naughty Jack down the road and what happened to, you know. And so the story of life is always there, but it's always seems to be more evocative if something's gone terribly wrong. So as I wrote, it's a beautiful song. And Sam Amidon did a great job at that. And we just hit it over the head. But the lyric all the time is, it's so desperately sad. It's fantastically sad. I love it.
Can you see that same pattern in a lot of the Delta blues?
Well, I think there are really unique places within the Delta blues which are original and so succinct. And there's a lot of stuff like in rock and roll where you go to the sort of push button phraseology and the terms. But some of the, of course, I'm English, so our relationship with Africa is a lot different. It's not good at all. Never could ever possibly be. No European relationship with Africa has ever been good. But it's a different thing. So I hear and I know if you go to Fry's Point, Mississippi, that there's an old convenience store there. And I went there in 1982, and the guy inside the shop, I knew that it was somewhere that Robert Johnson used to sing on the porch, and he said, another European. Well, he's not here. I said, oh, no, I know he's not here. Then he told me about how his father had to put up with the fact that when Robert turned up, everybody came to hear him. And he was so eloquent, and so his pictures that he painted, Robert Johnson, were just phenomenal, really good. He borrowed some from Kokomo Arnold or from, Leonard Jefferson or whatever, but the stories are so scintillating, I mean, can you imagine me? I was 15 years old when I first heard If I Had Possession Over Judgment Day. And I went, yeah, okay, I've got to do my French homework, but afterwards, I've got to find out what this is all about. And I realized it's the truth coming out from a lifestyle and a culture. 2 days ago, I was in Clarksdale. I went to see a friend down there who's a photographer, and she's been around the Central Delta for 40, 50 years. And she's part of the Tennessee Williams Historical Theatrical Society down there. And I used to go with her around looking for clues and looking for the pulse, the remains of the pulse. And sometimes at Red's juke joint with
Do you feel you actually get closer to it with that kind of balance? It is very much a pilgrimage.
Well, R.L. Burnside, those guys, they were the latter-day saints, and they mixed it up, and they were helped by, down from the Black Keys and stuff. It was fantastic. They took it on further on, but yeah, I think I don't know. I've been singing Parchment Farm as a song that Georgia Fame had a hit with Mose Allison for years as a kid, and I finally found myself outside Parchment Farm, driving along outside on Highway 49, and it said, if you slow down below 35 miles an hour, you will be taken in and arrested. Don't slow down outside Parchment Farm, because it's a high security prison. That's geographically and historically something that intrigues me, but of course, really, it's not very nice. So I am.
Because in a way, you get closer to the real history of it, and you actually see the roots of the pain that are expressed in the song.
Yeah. Well, yes, of course, and that was equally as evident in Mali and West Africa as it might be in Helena, Arkansas. It's just the pulse of life.
In performing these songs now and doing this exploration, how has it changed your attitude or interest in original songwriting? The last original song that you recorded was High and Lonesome on Raise the Roof.
Yeah. And with T-Bone.
Yeah.
And I love T-Bone desperately like a brother, and he said, I had no part in that. It was that time of night, you know. It was High and Lonesome is a funny song.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be funny.
But do you feel the need to write when
Yeah.
you have all of this to work with?
No, I want to write, but the world is in such a mess. Whatever I have to say is so trivial and so subjective, it doesn't exist really. I'm so sad with everything that it's about. I can't even start commenting on it in case I can't come back here again.
Since, Jump Street, the songs, that's the beauty of these songs. You can turn to them to speak for you.
Yeah.
You've got ghosts coming out of the woodwork saying, okay, if you're having trouble expressing this, we have a version. And you can actually, and that can be as powerful and cleansing on this end.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I think, funny thing, just thinking about when I worked in the 90s with Jimmy Page, and we went to Morocco, did some stuff there, and then the sequel to that was we were back down to a 4-piece band, and with Charlie, and it was just naked. And I really wanted to bring something home from my experiences down in the United States. So I wrote the lyrics to, titled that this thing called Walking into Clarksdale. And it was all about the evocative aspects of all those years of those songs. And the way they dealt the cards for me. So beautiful. There's nothing left. There's really nothing left of broken down hope, and a generation that's long gone, So it was the sort of last flurry of me talking about it all. In fact, I can't remember exactly what the lyrics are, and the voice is so low on the track. And I know there must be a bootleg somewhere, and I can find out what the hell I was talking about. But I know, burnt out emotion, all the stuff that goes with it. But yeah, I feel cleansed to some degree, but I really wish I could. I wish I could write. I wish I had a voice that was worth listening to on that level.
Can you just give people a sense of how Saving Grace came together? Because from what I understand, the band actually started with Matt Worley, the guitarist, approaching you
for a drink
in a pub. Is that how he introduced himself? Would you like a drink?
But he had a music shop, and he had great spirit. And he says I met him several times, but I can't. I just know that when I met him, he bought me a drink, and that's a major breakthrough. But I mean, I think it's something to do with, well, you knew Robin Williamson and Mike Heron, and then started reeling off all this incredible string band stuff, which I just went, somebody within 50 miles of my home that knows about this shit and cares. And so the thing came together like that, and it was just like influences. And really, if you have a catalyst, if you have an attitude, people can gravitate to it.
Yeah.
So Susie and I were in a totally different scene altogether, but they came along and they joined in the whole thing and listened to some of my madnesses, but they took it further on again, So with Tony had been around playing with groups the back end of the move and other fine sort of types of shards of ELO and things like that, or even what was Shane Fenton and the Fentones. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Somebody, so he worked with Alvin Stardust and stuff like that. So he was waiting for his moment to come out. Boom, and here we are. That's it.
What did it sound like when you first, can you actually characterize what it sounded like to you when you first played?
Well, it just bit by bit took baby steps in restraint, and the whole deal of my era certainly had a lot of shoulders, a lot of chest. It was like, why? You know, okay, that was okay, but that isn't the be-all and end-all of everything. So the idea of restraint and listening intently to what the other person's doing, who's looking at you with a stringed instrument, was crucial in its change of space.
Because one of the things you ended up doing is, as the thing was coming together, that's when COVID hit, and of course everything went to hell in a handbasket. But one of the things that you did was, because it was the safest way to play together, you played out in the open air.
Yeah.
And what struck me about that was that it would have been exactly the way the original, however original it was, in whatever century it was, that is how people performed. It wasn't usually on a stage, it wasn't this kind of thing. It was like you were in the neighborhood, you were there out in the field, playing for the community and doing that troubadour thing of almost telling the local news.
That's exactly correct, yeah. It's true, and also the troubadour, or the passing musician. I've noticed it in Mali when I went there with Skin Tyson and Justin Adams. We played at the Festival of the Desert with Ali Farka Touré and Gennaro, 60 kilometers north of Timbuktu. And I realized that as these families, the Tuareg families, were coming in from the Algerian border on camels with their sheep and land cruisers with the women driving with the gold. It's a matriarchal society, but I noticed that every family had a griot, and the griot was the guy who was the spokesman and the raconteur and the information zone for that family. And all the griots...
This is the human internet.
Yeah, they would sit together and talk absolute rubbish. They would go, well, and of course, when we were in Algeria, no, I know all about that. They were troubadours, that's great. But they were brilliant players. I made my boy Logan and I, we filmed, we did a 5-part series. It's on YouTube called Zirka, Z-I-R-K, which is, in Tuareg, it means blue because they wear these blue sheshes, and the indigo rubs off on their faces. And it's incredible footage. It's handheld a lot of it, but the people there, and so the audience, they've never seen a stage before. So there's a group called Super Orange de Gao. It's a football team, 11 players. And they're so majestic and they're playing away. And you see the stairs by the side of the stage, and the audience is going, normally I just dance around these guys, so I'm going to go up these steps and just move through the... Can you imagine that with Bruce Springsteen? I'm just going to have a little dance around. So the whole deal is that it's for everybody, for everything. And we lost that? Well, yes and no. I'm sure it's going
Well, we're going to get it back in a few minutes because...
We can't have everybody on the stage who know what it's like.
Because Robert and Saving Grace will perform for you. Before I do that, though, I want to ask, you have recorded 3 new tracks with the band, I guess, for record store.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to make another record soon?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean,
I take it where I can get it.
yes, exactly. I can understand that, everything we feel. We've got a government as well. It's like Sesame Street on acid. So, yeah, we could.
You would think the acid would help.
Well, it's not doing you lot much good.
I think it's starting.
Yeah. So, yeah, we had these songs that we normally might play on stage that we decided to record. There's a great Ralph Stanley song called Two Coats, and Bert Jansch wrote a song called Poison,
Oh, yes.
and we've sent
One
that.
Day Blues.
Yeah, that's right. And we've sent that into the sort of, well, very late 80s sort of This Mortal Coil gets happy-go-lucky, but not too Americana-y.
Yeah.
So there's some stuff going on, yeah.
New music coming in a few minutes. Please, Robert.